Thank you to everyone who has joined us today for this webinar. I'm Jessica Vogel. I'm the CMO at OfferFit, and I'm extremely excited to get to introduce David Edelman today, Executive Advisor, Senior Fellow at Harvard Business School, and former CMO of Aetna and CVS. Last month, David and Mark Abraham released their book, Personalized Customer Strategy in the Age of AI. It's already been named a USA Today bestseller and touts only 5-star reviews on Amazon. I'm very excited to share that we're going to be sending a copy of this book to everyone who is on today's webinar. So please look out for a message from the OfferFit team where you can place your order for your free copy. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, terrific to be here, Jessica.
Yeah. So anything else that I missed in your introduction that you'd like to share about your background?
Well, I've been in the field for 30 years. And so probably one thing that we can talk about my background is what kind of led me all the way here to this point. So my background in marketing goes back, and I'm going to age myself here, 1989. Before the internet was a commercial thing, I was a young consultant at the Boston Consulting Group and had 3 clients in a row who were starting to think about what could we do with customer information that we're starting to collect. And this was in the days of just direct mail, telemarketing, and we helped them develop loyalty programs, help them targeted marketing much better, think about improving the customer service experience. And I wrote an article called Segment of One Marketing, thinking that there was going to be much more to this going forward. And that launched my career. It got picked up, distributed widely, invited to speak at conferences, and most importantly, started working with more and more companies on how to think about their strategy for advancing towards personalization. Certainly then the internet became a thing, more and more digital tools, more capabilities such as content management, which was something I actually did not anticipate when I wrote the article. I was much more focused on the customer data than on the content. And so it became just widespread, but it was very, very focused on that marketing word. And unfortunately, a lot of it has been used to manipulate people,
Mm-hmm.
to hammer away at people with endless amounts of direct outreach because they may have looked at a pair of shoes that throw their name on it. And that's not really personalization. And now with AI, we are starting to see whole experiences changing, not just marketing, but deeper experiences that distinguish brands based on how they use customer information.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about brands you like to do business with, especially digital natives like Spotify, Netflix, Uber, the reason you like them is because they have information about you that they use to help you.
Mm-hmm.
More and more non-digital companies now are taking advantage of these capabilities, and we wanted to write a book to lay out what personalization could really mean as a strategic differentiator as opposed to a manipulative marketing tactic.
I really like that approach. And a lot of the book, you really talk about the entire organization, not just the marketing team. So that really resonated. So just to get started with the questions specific to the book, for those of you who are on the call, we will have time for some Q&A. So feel free to just drop in the chat or Q&A. I'll be monitoring. But I'm sure there's many things that we'll cover as part of this conversation. So, we've talked, I think your introduction was a perfect entry point. Personalization has been, something that we've talked about, the industry has been talking about for several years. Why, right now, what inspired you to write this book now? What inspired you to write this book at all and now, I guess?
Yeah, so just digging in a bit more from what I was talking about, I think the tools are here to really provide extraordinary experiences. Data capabilities are available to know more and more about your customers. Now, the key is doing so in a way that your customers feel comfortable with in a way that is permissioned, in a way that's not creepy. But if you can make a huge difference. So I wrote the book with the head of the marketing practice at BCG, Mark Abraham, and BCG has been doing surveys of consumers around the world about their attitude towards the use of personal information. And over the last couple of years, things have taken quite a turning point where now 70% of people, and this is pretty much across most age groups, are doing more and more business with brands that they feel use their information appropriately. On the flip side, 75% of people, probably a lot of the same ones, have stopped doing business with brands who they felt were using their information inappropriately. So, this is a real thing in terms of how to get this right.
Hmm.
And so we looked at over 200 companies in depth who were starting down the path of using customer information to differentiate themselves. Some have been much more successful than others. And we thought it was a good time to distill the learnings of what it takes to be a personalization leader. So
Hmm.
that led us to the book, and there's case studies, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the frameworks as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really, again, appreciated how tactical you really are in spelling out this is the path and the steps. So, one of the things that this book really focuses on are the five promises of personalization. So, I'd love to spend a little bit of time just sharing with the audience what those are and, how just why each of those pieces are important to the journey.
Yeah, and so I'll dive in, but before doing so, I want to give you an example of
Sure.
personalization. And then I'll bring the five steps in to show how they support this particular example. So this was back before COVID. I was living in Lexington, Massachusetts, and the town was offering an incentive for people to put solar panels on their homes. You would get a rebate on property taxes. And that opened up the floodgates for marketing. All kinds of pitches from all kinds of companies wanting to install and sell you solar panels. 40% off this, 30% off that, direct mail, slip it under the door, emails, all of this. And it's actually complicated because you have to pay for the installation, you have to buy or lease the panels. There are all the tax incentives to work through. If you generate more energy, you have to sell it. You sell it back to the grid. It's not a simple thing to work through. One physical piece of mail cut through and said, we've done the math on your specific property and believe that you could save over 20% per year on your home energy bills by working with Sungevity. There's a personalized URL in this envelope that'll explain how. Open up the envelope, type in the URL. Boom, I get a picture through Google Earth of the roof of my house with solar panels superimposed on the roof. Down the right-hand side is a calculation how much energy those panels would generate based on how many there were, our latitude and longitude, and the north, south, east, west orientation of the roof. Then they went to Zillow, got the square footage of our house, and used that to estimate the total energy that we would use over a year. So they
Wow.
had the numerator and the denominator, came out to 21.3%. I was impressed. That was pretty cool to explain, very personalized. But they went further. Click here to talk to a sales rep. I click. I'm immediately in a video conference with a guy who sees that I'm Mr. Edelman, greets me, says, I'm delighted, Mr. Edelman, to share with you how you can save 20% with Sungevity, and then starts to go through in a very simple way leasing versus sales, how the math works. He also was armed with two email addresses of neighbors of mine who have worked with them who could serve as references, whom I actually didn't know those people.
Hmm.
So the math made sense as I looked at the numbers and the references checked out. So we did it. And we didn't even look at a competitor. They made it so easy. And as I talked with neighbors, they had a similar experience. And
Hmm.
then through an app, you could do all the scheduling for the installation, monitor how much energy you're generating. When a squirrel ate through one of the wires, I got a notification and scheduled the servicing. So that's a personalized experience. That has all the components. So now let's break it down in terms of five things that it takes to put together a personalized experience. The first is, and most important, is to empower the customer, taking the customer's point of view and saying, how can we activate information about that customer to help them do something they couldn't before? Solar panels are complicated. And so they enabled me to understand how the heck to think about it. And that really worked in their favor because everything else just seemed like gimmicks and it wasn't clean and clear.
Hmm.
Second is to know me, to actually have data about me that I feel comfortable that they can use. Now, some people say, oh, isn't that creepy? They had that data, but that data is out there. And it
Hmm.
was tied to something going on in my town about solar panels, and everyone was talking about it. So it seemed very appropriate for them to activate that data. And we can get into some things of AI capabilities that allow you to import data, integrate it, normalize it, which they did. Then, once you do that, you've got to reach me. And so they decided they would actually use physical mail so that they could get that full message about the URL onto that piece of mail. And they had tested this a lot too. I had actually
Hmm.
spoken afterwards with their CMO, and they found that direct mail, good old direct mail, was the most effective way of doing it. And they reached me at a time when it was appropriate because there was this incentive going on in my town.
Hmm.
So we have empower me, know me, reach me, then show me. Make me feel like it's a personalized experience of you helping me, which certainly the visual image of my roof with the solar panels, with the explained math that's all tied to my particular situation, made that super easy. And now with Gen AI capabilities, you can spin up things like that really easily. And
Hmm.
then after show me, the last one, which is something people don't think about as much, is delight me, which means as you learn more about me, get smarter, make it better, improve it over time. And they actually did over time give us tips about how to be even smarter in terms of the way we managed our energy to conserve even more. And
Hmm.
so those five steps empower me, know me, reach me, show me, delight me. That's what you have to think through from the customer's perspective
Hmm.
together a truly personalized, differentiating experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I really liked how in the book you spoke about, personalization is systematic, but we want the customer to feel more like an emotional high and the surprise and delight so that it isn't, just a lot of, automated processes, which it sounds like Sungevity did a great job of really making you feel like a segment of one.
Yes, unfortunately, the company expanded way too fast beyond their headlights, went into overseas, into Australia and Europe, and ended up getting bought by a private equity company for pennies on the dollar. But they, but my experience actually ongoing with the app never changed.
Hmm.
Was seamless.
Yeah. And so it sounds like all of those five promises, would apply in 1989 when you first wrote that article or now. So how do you think about like AI and the changes to kind of each of those steps or like the process overall, like what the impact has been?
You might have thought of those in 1989, but your ability to do it cost effectively at
Mhm.
scale was simply not there. So, yeah, empowering me really has to do with being able to use digital channels to get things done, to place an order seamlessly, to be able to visualize and see things that in a dynamic, interactive way, to even have a video conference
Hmm.
with a rep instead of a phone call or somebody creepy coming to my door and trying to sell me
So you're like a globe.
my
Yeah.
house. Like, I'm really going to do that. So I think the whole interaction and experience of Empower Me now moderated more through digital channels, that's certainly new. Knowing me is very different. You could compile some very basic databases of customers beforehand, but now the capabilities in large scale database management with, for example, customer data platforms that can bring data together and operate it in a more integrated way, systems that can actually be front ends to digest data and integrate from different sources and normalize that data. One is a company is called narrative.ai, which is a front end that Snowflake uses to be able to take data from even different companies, different sources, bring it together, clean and normalize that data, and put that all in an integrated way into Snowflake, for example, that you can then analyze and use as if it were one original data set. You could not
Mm.
do that before.
Yeah.
Gen AI can spin up personalized visualizations. So being able to spin up a visual of my home with the solar panels, and that's not something you could have done before. And the most interesting part, though, of what is possible now is the test and learn, test and learn, test and learn that allows you to get better and smarter over time. AI needs data. And to personalize, AI needs more variation in data. And the more interactions you have with customers, the more you can test things and learn, the more you can feed that AI to help it get smarter. So that requires tools that didn't exist before.
Mhm.
And we're on a webinar sponsored by OfferFit, and OfferFit certainly is one of the key tools that enables that to happen. In fact, allowing you to test multiple different variables at the same time instead of a simple A/B split test. But it's also processes of managing your marketing so that you're operating in a way to get tests out the door faster because you
Mhm.
have automated tools that allow you to set up the test cells with OfferFit, to generate the creative, to be able to get it out the door with something like Braze or Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And so all of that allows you to get tight teams who can get tests out the door at least as fast as every 2 weeks. If it's taking you 12 weeks to get an email campaign out the door, that's ridiculous. It's too slow. You're not learning much, and you're certainly not driving something that's going to let you grow. And
Mhm.
fast cycle marketing and that kind of operations was not something as much on people's radar. It's much simpler testing. The capabilities weren't there to be fast. Now, not only are the capabilities there to do it, the imperative is there to do it. You have to do that in order to feed your intelligence engine.
Hmm. That's a really good call out. And so obviously the tech and the tools are an important part of how this has evolved so quickly. I'm also curious, what have you noticed from the companies that you've interviewed and worked with, other signs of operational readiness, whether that's like specific roles or org design that a business is, as they ramp up to try to be a personalization leader?
Yeah, one of the things I definitely notice is companies who are doing this well are addressing the tension between short term gains versus longer term strategy. Because with AI tools, it's really easy to bombard the hell out of people. And the personalization leaders are taking at the top level a customer facing approach, saying we want to distinguish ourselves as a brand who is adding value to customers based on the information that we have about them. So it really starts with strategic intent and a leadership team that's working together. Let me give you a contrast of examples. So I recently moved from Lexington to Cambridge, Massachusetts.
And hopefully got new solar panels.
We did not get our new house has it's so hard to put panels on it. Um, but anyway, it's smaller and we downsized. But we did get a new coffee maker. We upgraded to a Nespresso in order to get a really good coffee experience in the morning. So the Nespresso machine comes with 100 pods. Within 2 days after getting the Nespresso machine, I'm getting bombarded with offers from Espresso to buy more pods. Okay, how much coffee do they think we drink? Okay, within 2 weeks, they're sending me offers to buy more machines. So maybe they think I'm a small business, but my address is clearly a residence and they have my home address. Plus, they could ask me. Think
Yeah.
about the change in intent of what they did versus 2 days after I get my Nespresso machine, asking me, are you enjoying it? Have you figured out how to work it? Here's some tips on how to get more variety out of it. Which are the flavors that you like? How much coffee do you tend to drink over the course of a week? And they could have used that to then send me tailored offers every 3 weeks with flavors that I like and maybe offers to try new flavors and expand,
Hmm.
maybe move into cold coffee. But they didn't do that. They didn't have that intent
Hmm.
versus the Sungevity example. So I'll
Yeah.
give you another example of a company that's trying to sell but is thinking about the customer first. So Cisco is the food delivery company, not the tech company. SYSCO. They have trucks all over the place delivering food to eating establishments. If you're running an eating establishment, you do not want to spend a lot of time ordering food. That you have a lot of other things to do. And Cisco recognized that. So when you open up the Cisco app to place an order, in 300 milliseconds, it knows who you are, your restaurant. It has likely asked you for copies of your menus in the past, so they know what you serve, your price points. They know geographically where you are and the demographics and tastes of that neighborhood. They know whether you buy in bulk or on spot market. They know the nearest warehouse to you. They know whether that warehouse its food has stuff that they want to move at a discount to get out of the warehouse. And they can actually suggest to a buyer new menu items that would fit with their restaurant that could take advantage of food that would be discounted. And so that's a total change in perspective versus just bombarding buyers with discount offers. And when we
Hmm.
talked with Cisco buyers, they said it's a no brainer. They always feel like they're getting a good deal. It saves them an enormous amount of time. They've discovered new menu items, and that's why Cisco is building share. So
Yeah.
there's a whole, but think about the Cisco stuff that combines e commerce, it combines pricing, it combines supply chain all together, having to work as an executive leadership team, saying we're going to create this experience. So start by empowering our customer. We're going to bring together all the data from around the company and not have it in separate silos. We're not going to bombard the customer with push offers. They're going to come to us on the app. We'll render to them ideas and offers that are tailored to them. And they are running over 200 experiments every week to constantly test new ways to serve customers and the right combination of things to show. So
Hmm.
there's a very big difference in strategic intent. The leadership team is focused on it, and they're really focused on customer value.
Hmm. Yeah, and I know, in the book we you spoke a lot about customer satisfaction, and obviously it seems like a no-brainer that personalization would improve customer satisfaction, but there's also other like value drivers within the business. So that it actually is driving positive business outcomes to personalize as well. So would you share on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And there's lots of different ways of thinking about the value drivers of personalization. Let me give you a not so necessarily so obvious example. When I was chief marketing officer at Aetna, it was health insurance. Most people do not understand their health insurance. We did a survey. 8% of people, 8, that's 1 out of 12, understand their health insurance, how it really works. That's a problem. That leads to calls into the call center, people making mistakes and getting care. That's going to cost them money. They're unhappy. All of that is bad. So, but there's a lot of legal and other constraints on making the product simpler. So we had to educate people. So one of the things we did was create personalized videos for new members so that all new members would get so we used a company called Sunday Sky. This is not sophisticated AI. It doesn't have to be. It's simple animations, but it is personalized. So Jessica finds out what her exact health insurance is, who in her family is covered. Do they all have primary care relationships with physicians? If not, here's 5 in your area who are taking new patients. Click here to schedule. Here's also 3 urgent care centers within 5 miles of your house, so you don't have to always go to the emergency room. Here's how the economics of your plan works and how to think about it. That was a home run. That led 70% of people watched the 3.5-minute video. Calls to the call center went down. Satisfaction went up. So those are other business drivers.
Yeah.
Also, cost went down in terms of the call center, so it clearly paid off. Customer satisfaction and retention. And what's also interesting is people were receptive to our emails more. As a result,
Hmm.
they trusted us. And so, and this is healthcare, so it's important that they read what we send. And so we got more receptivity to that. So it really depends on your use case and what you're trying to do, but there's many different possibilities. But you have to start with that use case and the value you want to drive, and then work through the know me, reach me, show me, delight me based on the use case. Because otherwise, you're going to just chase what's all the data we can get. That's going to take months.
Hmm.
So, what's all the things we can do with Gen AI tools? Well, you can experiment, but towards what? And
Yeah.
eventually your CFO is going to say, where's the value? So you got to start with use cases that are going to address customer opportunities to unlock value and focus on that. And the
Hmm.
leaders, as we've analyzed them, do that. And what's really interesting about those is we created a scale called the personalization index. We ranked 200 companies based on, in each of the 5 promise areas, what capabilities did they have and what experience did they deliver? We surveyed their customers. We also played mystery shopper for a lot of them. And then we scored them. And those who scored higher on the personalization index grew over a 7-year period at 7 to 10 percentage points higher per year than the laggards. So this is real in terms of financial impact, and it cuts across different verticals. It's not just that some verticals that maybe have more data do better than others. Actually, every vertical we looked at had a spread where there were leaders and laggards.
Hmm. Yeah, so those are probably some very big actual revenue numbers if you look at that 7 to 10 percentage
Yep.
point over time. So I want to go back to a word you just used in there, which was trust. And obviously, as we have access to more data and there's more tools and AI, obviously, it's becomes probably even more important to make sure that brands are able to, establish and maintain that trust. So how are the personalization leaders approaching that?
Uh, Trust is important. There's a whole chapter in the book focused on trust, privacy, security, guardrails. And let me first say, there are not yet clear codified best practices. We are all learning.
Hmm.
What's creepy to you, Jessica, may be less so for me. And it's a very personal thing. So, several things that we've seen the leaders do. First of all, whenever they are interacting with customers, they find opportunities to ask permission to capture data and use it, or They just ask people questions and ask. For example, Nespresso should have asked me, how much coffee do I drink? Which flavors do I have? But financial service companies like Fidelity start asking you gradually questions that eventually layer up into your financial plan. So they
Hmm.
get a better sense of what you're driving towards, and they can use that to create triggers that help them and you realize if you're off track and can take actions to get you back on the right road. And so, first party data is one of the most important things, and more companies are using that. There's actually a company called One Creation that I've
Hmm.
come across that Marriott, who I'm really impressed with. They are one of the leaders who we talk about in the book. Marriott's using them to gather personal preferences for travel. What beverages do you like to drink? Do you have any allergy issues? Do you like feather pillows or not? And they're using that then to customize the experience upon arrival. So one definite thing is ask people. Then you
Hmm.
have to use it if you're asking people. So they have to do that. The second is you have to have the customer lens. If you were receiving this, would this be creepy?
Hmm.
And you should be testing that with your own employees.
Yeah.
And think about employees from a lot of different departments, not just the marketers. Test it on your employees and see what kind of reactions you get. The third is create guardrails, things that you just will not do. Things, information you're not going to use, information that you're not going to, judgments from AI that you're not going to get into. And a really important area is going to be pricing. Because I
Hmm.
do think with AI, we could move into, quote, personalized pricing and personalized promotions that could be very unfair and have bias in them. And that's a very dangerous road to go down.
Hmm.
So we got to think very carefully about where, as a brand, you want to draw the line, especially if you don't want to get bombarded with flack through social media, which can
Hmm.
easily happen.
Hmm.
So these are some of the things. There's also new roles like chief privacy officers. Often there's roles of chief data officers that are also looking at the management of permissions and preference centers. So there's a number of experience, and we get into examples and everything about that in the book.
Hmm. Yeah, that's there was one quote that I think I read to you before, but it said, I may not have chosen to live in a world where brands have this much data about me, but they do, so they better put it to good use responsibly to make my life easier and better. I just thought that that really perfectly captured the value creation. Like as marketers, obviously we know how much of our data is probably out there, but avoiding that digital creep and really adding value, very
Yeah, and
important.
it comes back to the survey I talked about before, where 70% of people say they're doing more business with brands that use it appropriately, and 75% say they've shut down their relationship with brands that weren't.
Hmm. Yeah. And so to speak to a few of the examples that you just shared, and then I'd encourage anyone, if you have any questions, please drop them in. Um, you highlight different industries in the book, obviously retail as one where they've been leaders in personalization just by nature of the business. Um, so what industries do you think are most ripe for disruption to like their personalization efforts?
Yeah, I think those where there are considered purchases and a fair amount of information going back and forth. So, for example, where I could see retail going is okay, you've got a sense of stuff I buy. Maybe I'll tell you a bit more about my family. Here's my budget. Give me my shopping list. Just give me a
Yeah.
potential shopping list. Here's the ages of my kids. And I'm setting a fixed budget. So you got to work within the budget. Give me a shopping list. Those are kind of things. I'm going to a particular event. I have this blouse that I love, but I want to get a matching ensemble. Here's my budget. What should I get? I
Hmm.
think we're going to see areas of retail like that. Home
Yeah.
Depot is working on something where I just moved, for example. I want to renovate one of my bathrooms. take a picture of the current bathroom. From that picture, you can figure out the dimensions of the bathroom and where the fixtures are. And then I say the kinds of things I want in the new bathroom. Maybe also upload some pictures from Pinterest of styles that I like, looks that I like. Give them a budget and say, give me 3 to 5 potential remodeling plans. Give me drawings, give me plans, give me budgets, and then could you actually install it?
Mm,
You hire the contractors and coordinate that. They're working on that.
yeah.
Marriott's creating a platform by which you're a Bonvoy member, you want to create your trip, you explain where you want to go, and they're going to pull it together. So we're going to see in a number of considered purchases, especially ones where pieces come together,
Hmm.
companies creating interfaces that help them provide personalized solutions to an individual, not just a single thing, but a whole solution. I think
Hmm.
that's coming. And I'm hearing that from the companies we're talking with. Some of the new AI capabilities like agents are going to be a factor in this. And so we're going to start seeing that kind of competition emerge.
Hmm. Very interesting. So we have some questions that I think actually are very relevant to this conversation. This one. First, how can companies like healthcare, pharma that are very highly regulated leverage personalization and gain trust if they're not able to contact customers directly through like HIPAA challenges or other regulations?
Well, there's a line in terms of, can you contact them or not? Um, for example, we had a program at Aetna where we were trying to use marketing to help nudge people to take healthier actions because it would benefit
Hmm.
them. And we
Hmm.
had data, for example, that said, you're a diabetic, you haven't had your levels checked, you should. It's a good
Hmm.
thing. You're somebody who is in an immune compromised state, you haven't gotten a COVID shot, you should. So we'd recommend it and tell you where to go to get it. That would be a network, that it would be covered in your plan and make those recommendations. So we did do that. We reached out through email, we reached out through text. We did a lot of test and learn. I wish we had OfferFit in those days, because there was a lot of hand done multivariate testing and setting up control cells that we did in order to figure out the right way to motivate different people to do things. But
Hmm.
it worked. It made a difference. So I think you have to, it depends on where you are in healthcare in terms of what you can actually do. I know, for example, in pharma, one of my biggest clients is a pharma company who's personalizing their approach to doctors and informing doctors about particular medications and how they might be appropriate in their practices. They look at which content the doctor has clicked on and read so they can tell the kinds of interests the doctor has. They use that for a salesperson follow up who's armed with information about what that doctor was interested in. After the discussion with the salesperson, they follow up afterwards with another piece of content furthering that conversation. So, it may not always be the end consumer, it could be your channel, and in healthcare, the doctor is the channel, but you can be creative and find different ways of bringing personalization to bear.
Great. Thank you. Another question that we got from the audience. In the article in the Harvard Business Review, you talked a little bit about how this connects to Net Promoter Score. Can you elaborate on that connection and what you saw succeed or fail when companies were tying the framework to Net Promoter outcomes?
Yeah, yeah. So I talked about how leaders have a higher growth rate. They also have higher net promoter scores. And we have seen, and it's very interesting because it's not linear. So it's not that if you take a particular industry and you look at the distribution of people who are trying personalization, and some are clearly laggards, some are in the middle, some are higher, it's not like their net promoter score goes up in a straight diagonal line. What
Hmm.
actually happens is the personalization leaders spike up. Um, in terms of hire because they've cracked something that has connected with customers who actually see a dramatically better experience. So there's some threshold in consumers' minds where the experience, once it crosses that threshold of adding value, allows them to spike, and makes them much more interested in working with a brand, probably then trusting it more, willing to give it more information, and in the end, getting better value out of it.
Hmm. Very cool. Thank you very much. So I have one last question, and then David will let you go. So you've obviously been studying personalization and operating within this space for a long time. What was the most, I guess, surprising thing that you came across through your research, or anything that was kind of different than what you had expected starting it?
There's a couple of things. One was that the difference between leaders and laggards is true within financial services, within retail, within healthcare, within travel, within B2B. We looked very deeply in B2B, a lot of different B2B categories. So it wasn't that there were certain industries that were
Hmm.
more advanced, it's that there were specific companies who were more advanced than others within their sectors. That was surprising.
Hmm.
And that merited really digging into how those companies are operating differently. The
Yeah.
other thing is that it is about how they operate. It's not the technology per se. Yes, they need
Hmm.
tech tools to do things like if you want to do multivariate testing at scale, you got to get OfferFit, no question. If you really want to test and learn at scale, but the reality is, if you don't have the processes to be able to get creative spun up quickly, even with Gen AI, you've got to come up with
Hmm.
the ideas, you got to figure out who you're going after, what's your goal, what's the differences between these segments and those segments. You got to think about the operations of getting it all out the door, measuring it on the back end. More of that'll get automated, but you still need operational processes. And if you're regulated at all, you've got to get compliance into the loop so that they can really be a part of that engine with eyes on it. And so
Hmm.
the way companies operated seemed as important, if not more so, than the technologies that they had. A
Hmm.
lot of companies already have tools that can do a lot more than they're taking advantage of. And some of
Hmm.
them are getting basic advancing AI capabilities. But it's a change in operations. It's an attitude also that says, we're not going to just simply bombard people like Nespresso. We're going to create a much more interesting personalized buying experience like Sungevity.
Hmm.
That's a stance, that's a strategy. And it was really interesting to see that difference.
Yeah. It's just been so interesting for me working in the space for a long time to get to learn from you, and so many great insights in the book that we really only scratched the surface on today. So thank you so much, David. Thanks to everyone who took time out of your day to join us. We'll send out a link for where we can ship your books. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks so much.